Hi, I'm Bart Herbison, Executive Director of the Nashville Songwriters Association, and this week the story behind the song is When You're in Love with a Beautiful Woman, and one of my heroes, Mr. Even Stevens. And we're going to do a couple consecutive weeks with Even, but before we talk about that song, you know something I didn't know about you?
What's that?
And I've known you forever. I didn't know you designed and built Emerald Studios.
Well, I did with David Malloy.
Right,
David,
yeah.
David and I owned that together.
I knew you owned it, but I didn't know you were the architect. That's so
Oh
pretty
yeah,
cool.
we designed it. Tried to, we didn't have a good place to work at that time in Nashville. The studios weren't great at that time, so we decided we were always going to Muscle Shoals or Los
Right.
Angeles to record just for the studios. So we decided to build one that we thought was state of the
Well,
art.
Nashville owes you. I mean, the history of that place, man.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
It's-
we're really proud of that. It took a long time to get it together, but it turned out good.
And I could take weeks on who you are. All the country stuff, Joe Cocker, Julio, the London Symphony. But you know the question I get asked most about you, and I got asked in the lobby by some of the
What's that?
NSAI employees.
What's that?
Is his name really Even?
Well, of course it is.
But don't you think that's kind of like don't you think that's a song? You were destined for this.
Well, yeah. My name really isn't Even Stevens.
that.
My last name is Stevens, but I was in the Coast Guard before I got into music. I was a Morse code operator. And online, when you send a Morse code, you have a handle, and it's usually your initials. But since my last name was Stevens, they called me Even online. So when I got into music, I thought that was a good handle still,
Well, that's too, my
Yeah.
friend. So when you're in love with a beautiful woman, I think it was a really important song. We'll talk about how the song came about in a minute, but Dr. Hook, they're big. Disco kind of is hitting at this time or at its peak.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't what I think they set out to do, but
No.
it became a hit in that genre. And something else, it was usually Ray Sawyer. But if I remember correctly, when they were working up the parts, Ray acknowledged, he goes, Dennis sings this better than I do. And Dennis LeCourrier ended up doing the lead.
Yeah, I don't remember it actually happening that they made that decision. Dennis just had that great balladeer
Right,
voice,
right.
and I think it just fit him best because of that. But I was really glad when they did it. You talk about the disco thing. It had a straight 4 feel,
Right.
which I didn't really write it that way. I wrote
It
it
was
more
almost a line dance disco thing everybody was doing.
Yeah,
Kind of a-
yeah. It was in all the pop stations, not just disco. But it was right at the end of that thing,
Right.
And I really wrote it more like a Smokey Robinson feel,
Right.
like a push feel, like boom, boom, kind of a heartbeat kind of thing. But actually, when they were recording it, they did the first take down at Jackson Road or Jackson Highway Studios at Muscle Shoals with the Muscle Shoals guys, and I was there. And they did a cut of it and came in to listen, and their producer, Ron Hafkin, says, "What do you think?" And I went, "It's getting there." And he goes, "No, that's it." And I went, it don't sound right to me. It don't feel right to me. And then, but as it went up the charts,
Yeah.
I was going, "Man, this guy's a genius."
And not only that, even it charted in so many countries, and it had such a long run because it caught on here, and then it was
Yeah.
Belgium, Australia, Austria. It was everywhere.
Well, it's still the song that never dies, which I'm very fortunate for
Yeah.
that. And it was, I think it was platinum or gold in 13 countries.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
tell me about the day you wrote it. What's the story behind that song?
Well, I was kind of on the street during that time. I'd had a couple hits with Eddie at that point, but I met this new girl and I was dating her for a few months, and she was a singer in a group, and she was playing at the Vanderbilt Holiday Inn in a band. And that night I went down to see her and waiting for her to get her break so I could talk with her, and I never got to talk with her because all the guys were hitting on her
Right.
because she was really pretty. And so I kind of got pissed about that. And I got in my car and I wrote that song in about 5 minutes, heading to my apartment, and just wrote the song. And when I picked up the guitar, I knew the chords and everything. It was all in my head, the melody and everything. And I just wrote it really quick like that because it was a real deal. It's about jealousy and paranoia and that kind of stuff. And
yeah, here's the line, that I think describes the whole song, and really profound to me. You watch your friends.
yeah, that verse is my favorite verse about the telephone and all that. But I not long after that, with Eddie and David, I wrote, and Randy McCormick, I wrote "Suspicions,"
Right.
which is kind of a jealousy song, in a way too, an uneasiness about someone.
So I always ask this when they're inspired by a girl. Did she know it was about her?
Oh yeah.
Was that good or
I
bad?
call those years my paranoid years. It was good. In fact, on the demo that I did, she's singing background on it. Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Cool. Now, it's been recut. I'm not sure by huge pop artists, but I've just seen so many versions by indie bands. It gets covered all the time.
It does. My favorite one is Steel Pulse, a Rastaman group from England, which is a big Rasta group, and I really like their cut of it. They go off on it and do strange things in it, and it feels so good, their cut. But the strangest cut I had was by a woman in Germany. And so I think she was of the alternate lifestyle, But her singing "When You're in Love with a Beautiful Woman" was kind of strange.
But cool. I really think about it. I haven't heard that. I'm going to check it out.
Dr. Hook's producer said if you can do this with a beer in Germany, you have a hit. When you're in love with a beautiful.
So, what? And Dr. Hook still does it.
Yeah. Well, I was really lucky to get that cut because I actually, right after I wrote that song, I went in and recorded it at Steve Singleton's demo studio. And I used Jimmy Capps, was playing acoustic guitar, and Billy Linneman on upright bass, and that's all it was. And I was recording that, and the next day my Uncle Jack, who was my favorite uncle out in Utah, called me, and he happened to be Engelbert Humperdinck's best friend. And since Engelbert got to the United States, they were golfing buddies and everything, and he'd always call me and say, you got any songs I can play for Engelbert? And I'd never do it because I thought it was kind of cheesy pitching songs to Engelbert through my uncle, you know. And for years I never did it. And when I wrote that song, I thought, man, this would be a good song for Engelbert. He'd head after the lovin',
Right.
And so I called up.
It was a different feel the way you did
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
All different arrangement.
And so I called him up. I said, I think I got a song Engelbert would be really great on. And he says, well, come out. So I flew out there. And Engelbert and my uncle met me, and we went to the Beverly Hills Hotel and had some drinks, and then went to Engelbert's house. And Engelbert's house was on Sunset Strip, and it was Jane Mansfield's mansion, old mansion. It had a heart-shaped swimming pool, 13 bathrooms. I lived in a single-wide trailer in Mount Juliet at the time, so it was a little strange for me. And so after we'd hung out and played darts and drank and stuff, he said, well, I hear you got a song, and I had a tape of it. And I said, yeah, I do. And he says, well, come down to my rec room. I just had a $30,000 sound system put in. It should sound incredible. So we go down there, and it's awesome. And he puts my tape in there, and he starts it, and it goes doom, 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 and he ate my tape.
Oh.
I went, you ruined my tape. He goes, your tape ruined my machine. So that was the end of it. I hadn't taken a guitar with me. He didn't have any guitars, so I couldn't play him the song. So he said, well, send me a copy of it. So I hung out with him a little bit, and the next day I flew back to Nashville all depressed because I really thought that was the one. And when I got back to town, I decided to put Sherry, who was the girl that the song was written about, and myself on some backgrounds on it. Went back in the studio, and right before I went in, I ran into my buddy Shel Silverstein.
Right.
And he'd been writing all of Dr. Hook's hits, almost everything they ever did. Sylvia's Mother, cover of Rolling Stone, Got Stoned and I Missed It, all those songs. And he said, hey, Eve, and he's the only guy I let call me Eve. He said, Eve, I've been writing a lot of songs, and Dr. Hook's doing a new album, and they asked me for songs, and I played them a bunch, and they don't seem to want this bunch. He says, but I think you've got the songs they could do now. And do you mind if I bring the producer over to the studio when you're recording? I went, yeah, that'd be great. So he came over that night and heard I was working on Beautiful Woman, putting the backgrounds on it, and he said, let's cut that. And 2 days later, we were down in Muscle Shoals recording the record. But I owe Shel Silverstein a great debt of gratitude because, I mean, it was so big of him to pass that baton on to me, and as a songwriter. He sure was. He sure was.
And it opened an important door because you and Engelbert have had a long, multi-year relationship. You produced his records, many cuts. But fabulous story behind the song this week. We're going to hear a little bit of it. It's Even Stevens And when you're in love with a beautiful woman.
Well, let's see here. When you're in love with a beautiful woman, it's hard. When you're in love with a beautiful woman, you know it's hard. 'Cause everybody wants her, everybody loves her, everybody wants to take your baby home. When you're in love with a beautiful woman, you watch your friends